This week's SyrupCast is sponsored by Roam Mobility. Stop paying roaming fees. For unlimited talk, text, and data while traveling in the US, visit roammobility.com and order your SIM card today. Welcome to SyrupCast episode 27 on this, the last day of 2014. As always, I'm joined by my cohorts in crime, Douglas Soltis. How are you, sir?
Go to hell, 2014.
Yes. And Jane McIntyre. How are you
Yay, drinking!
Oh, it's a bit early. I hope you are at least putting some tea in that whiskey.
No, there's no whiskey yet. I'm saving myself.
Oh, you have the same double-walled glasses as I do.
No, this one is one I got for free at the LCBO. I'm not coming off well. It's like we can just cut the first 5 minutes. This came for free in the LCBO.
Oh, that's a good cup.
Yeah, but I do have the Bodum double walls.
I got these. These are my favorite.
Oh, nice. Where'd you get those? Sorry, fuck mobile tech. Where'd you get them cups, Daniel? Sorry.
We're so bad at podcasting.
I forgot not to swear. I'm sorry.
It's okay. Explicit tag makes us more popular anyway.
Really, it does.
I got them from an ex, actually. She gave them to me for my birthday, and they were one of the things that I was not willing to get rid of because I'm like, you know what? You live your life and you go through these experiences and you get things on the way and like sometimes you get rid of them because they bring you painful memories and sometimes you keep them because they make your coffee really delicious and warm. So
or they're
a similar experience when a guy that I dated gave me the entire Calvin and Hobbes collection, and I was like, "Yeah, I'm gonna give
that thing." And that thing is so heavy. It's actually more of a burden to get rid of it.
A book that he collected.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I bought that whole it's like a 2-book set, and it's so heavy. It's like 20 pounds.
But they're so good.
Oh, it's
One
amazing.
of the best presents I've gotten, really. But yeah.
Douglas, has one of your exes ever given you a really good present that you kept?
Yeah, let's not talk about tech. Let's talk about what our exes gave us for Christmas.
I have a general tendency to burn it all.
Nice.
But I am in my bedroom, which has a even one might say like a tarp, a piece of fabric from Nepal that still sits over my bed that I should probably burn in a garbage can and cleanse the year.
Douglas, you know the way you're from the countryside?
Do I know the way that what?
You're from the countryside.
I'm from the countryside,
I think it's really funny that when Daniel talks about things that his ex gave him, it's like really douchey coffee mugs, and when you talk, you're like, got a real nice tarp that I held on to.
No, he covers his CD collection with it.
Oh yeah, gotta cover up all
I honestly don't. You can see it in the background. It's completely uncovered.
Well, then the joke was, it was not good. It fell flat. What else fell flat this year?
Everything.
On a good note.
Segue.
The internet.
The internet was terrible all year. No, let's talk about the good and bad of 2014. So, this was a particularly interesting year for content. I think that there was a lot of consolidation on the content front, a lot of media companies buying out other media companies, growing, raising money, which is good for the industry, but also terrifying. And we saw big sites like The Verge hiring, or Vox in general hiring like millions of writers and launching Vox.com. There's BuzzFeed, which is growing. First Look started The Intercept, and we know how that turned out. They got an exclusive interview with Jay from Serial, so that's their biggest success by far.
Mobile Nations Corp doubled in size.
Mobile Nations is
Oh, sorry. Oh my God. This is how done I am with this year. I meant to say MobileSyrup Corp, and I said Mobile Nations.
Oh God.
Oh.
Well, Mobile Nations did grow, but they always grew. Yes, you guys are here. You are the reason that I'm standing here today. I probably would have died from exhaustion if you guys hadn't come on board.
I think you're the reason we're here, because otherwise we would be poor and hungry.
We don't pay you.
Yeah.
It's true.
I'm still hungry though.
Facebook sticker packs, that's what we get.
BBM sticker packs, but we'll get to that later. So, yeah, I think this year was really great for us. We went through some turmoil, a little bit of hit a couple bumps with the redesign back in July and August. So, overall, we launched the podcast, though, which was great, and we're now on our 27th episode, and it's the most popular podcast on the internet by far. So, that's great.
Not involving murders or sports.
Right. Wait, does Grantland have a podcast?
Grantland has all the podcasts.
Oh, I haven't gotten to those yet.
They're actually named iTunes top podcast of 2014.
I think we should just start a podcast talking about other podcasts.
Ooh, meta. We could sell that to Vox or BuzzFeed.
I'll sell my soul to Vox. Just to get on Chorus, just to get on their CMS. That CMS is amazing. I'm a big fan. Okay, so, but we don't really need to talk about media. We can talk about tech, because that's what we do. So, what happened in tech? I think the biggest trend this year, whether we liked it or not, was wearables, and I think we can probably start there pretty safely. There was, after Google launched Android Wear in March, and Apple announced the Apple Watch in September, I think the notion of wearables going mainstream was already out there, but this sort of cemented it. Jane and I were at the Android Wear launch at Google I/O in June, so we got to see firsthand sort of the missteps of like first generation wearables, but it was a lot more interesting than what we saw at CES last year, which was just like a whole bunch of companies trying to throw Android onto a 2-inch display and call it a smartwatch. So let's start there. What do you guys? I mean, do you think wearables are where they should be? Do you think that they should have waited a couple more years to get the tech down? What are your thoughts?
I think it's weird because I don't know if it's just that I'm super young, but I feel like the early adopter phase has like gotten really, really short. So now that it really only takes like a year or two for companies to like quote get it right. If you bought one this year, you're probably planning to buy one next year, and that's kind of like, I don't know. You're saying should they have waited, and it's like, yeah, but I mean, I think people who bought it this year are pretty happy. Like they got what they were expecting.
I think you're totally right. I think the early adopter phase, or like I think the cycles of tech development have.
That's what I mean. They've made it so short.
Yeah. So wearables are exactly where they should be right now in terms of their development. Whether or not that's interesting, like they're not where they should be to be compelling, but they're where they need to be to get there. Because I think it's less about getting the tech right as it is getting all the functionality and the use case and the understanding of why it's important, right? And I think it's going to happen faster with wearables than it did with smartphones because, first of all this wearable tech is usually paired to the functionality of a smartphone, and second of all, the general tech density of society now is higher, where adding something to your wrist that does stuff is like people are looking towards that, whereas the smartphone thing, there almost needed to be an argument for that, or it needed to reach like a Jesus phone tipping point before people were like, okay, we need this in our lives. I think people are looking for more tech in their lives.
Go ahead.
Well, that being said, though, so we work in a shared office space with other tech-related companies, and late one evening this week, I was just shooting the conversation with another company, and they mentioned, we were talking like, what were the biggest stories in tech, and they were like, yeah, wearables, and then one of the gentlemen just popped up a smartwatch that I'd never even heard of, just like one of the models that we didn't even like graze our coverage because it was just random. He's like, yeah, I got it. Don't know what to do with it or what it's for. And I was like, yeah, that's wearables in 2014. like significantly more interest, and still not the thing that will get the mass populace to say, I want one of these things. But I think it's too early to expect that from a product category.
Yeah, you wrote about this earlier in the month or late November when Tom Emmerich, our wearables expert, hosted We Are Wearables, and Nielsen had a few stats about wearables and smartwatches in particular. And I mean, really, people know about smartwatches, but they don't really know why they need to buy one. And I think only 4% of Canadians own one.
Yeah.
So that's a very low number. But it's also indicative of, like, if we went to 2008, 2009, and we asked people, why do you think you need a smartphone? Even though it was a year out, they would have said, well, because I want to, communicate with my friends and call my parents and take photos and share it on, even though Instagram at the time wasn't launched, like, you can share photos on Facebook, things like that. The value proposition of a wearable is still out, it's still sort of unclear, and I don't think it will solidify even when the tech is ready. Right now I use my smartwatch for notification triage, and I think that's what most people do. But I've gone days and weeks without anything on my wrist, and I don't regret or I don't miss it when I don't have it. It's a nice value add, but if even people in 2008, 2009, back when the first, second generation iPhone and Androids were coming out, they were still addicted to their smartphones just as much as they are today.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, if I left my house without my phone, I would flip my brick. And if I did that with a smartwatch, I would probably not even notice until I came back and saw it, sitting
The
on
only
my
reason I notice is because, and this happened, I remember the first time this ever happened to me when I had like a phone, like a cell phone that had a vibrate function, and now it's happening is that when I leave it at home, I'm like, was that my wrist? And then I'm like, because I swear that I can feel it vibrating, and then I check my wrist and there's nothing there, and I'm like, oh yeah. So this is like a new like phantom vibration thing where you're like, is that my phone? And then it's not, because it never is.
Well, back in the day, Douglas would probably echo this. When Blackberry OS could allowed you to set custom notifications, custom vibrations for specific people, I would when my mom would text me, I would have like a quick 3 vibrations, and then when I got a BBM from you, I would have like 2 long vibrations or whatever. Like, I set that up so specifically, and that really messed with my. It was, but it really messed with my equilibrium when I didn't have it, because I would feel like phantom vibrations, but like specific vibrations.
That's so weird. And this is the thing. There's like an entire Wikipedia article on people who think that on that feeling and that phenomenon where you're like, you can swear that you can feel it even when you don't have the device. They haven't added smartwatches to it yet. I checked.
But smartwatches are, I mean, what one thing that's very obvious about smartwatches is that A, they're not going anywhere, but B, they're going to replace even those early first, second generation fitness wearables very quickly, because they're consolidating all of these features into a single product, just the way that smartphones did in the mid 2000s. And you're not going to need a Fitbit, because your Apple Watch will eventually read your heart rate all the time, and it will communicate to Apple Health, or your Android Wear device will communicate to Google Fit. And the consolidation of wearables is going to happen much more quickly than I think most people realize.
Yeah, so let's tie that back to what you were saying before about the use case, because unless you have a piece of hardware doesn't usually bring with it specifically articulated use cases unless it's designed as a utility. So you think of hardware as camera, hardware as microphone, video recorder, display screen, things like this, all being consolidated into a smartphone. I don't think it's up to the smartwatch manufacturers to build in specific use cases. They just have to be robust enough to support whatever use cases the service providers kind of come up with. Because the thing that made smartphones so compelling in the early days, and that general transition, wasn't the like embedded platform stuff. It was all the apps. It became an app ecosystem. So I think you will see all these, health bands and things like that be consolidated into one device, and then that's where the software providers can kind of take advantage of that. As I kind of wrote in my end of the year thing, like I want an Apple Watch and I don't know why yet, but I also didn't know why I wanted a tablet, or I didn't really know why I wanted a smartphone when I first had it. I just thought it was totally boss. Like you could just feel potential. I think getting that potential down is like way harder in the wearable space, simply because it's like everything's contextual. Context is like the hardest thing to do, technology-wise. It takes a lot of like care and nuance, and it's more than just an algorithm. It's more than just like, hey, pretty photos, or it's more than spec bumps can provide. It takes like real design. But if it works, if someone gets it right, it's going to be crazy good.
What does that mean, though, getting it right? Context is still something that smartphones have trouble offering, and we've seen examples of this. Even Google Now is magic in so many ways, but I find it frustrating that it doesn't offer the same sort of real-time predictions as a native app experience. And I'll give you an example. It provides transit information. So if I am near a transit stop that I use all the time, it'll give me the next 3 transit times. But because it only updates every 6 minutes, 12 minutes, and this isn't a problem with Google Now specifically, it's a problem with the way that we interact with our smartphones, it's a problem with connectivity and battery life, but it's never going to replace me explicitly going into a transit app to look up the next streetcar times. And that's just a fact, because those sort of predictive pieces of information that should be pushed to you are, Google doesn't know what you're doing all the time. I mean, eventually it will and want to, but
so that context is we have smartphones, we have smart apps, we have dumb systems, in the sense that they're barely connected together, and in ways that don't leverage the benefits of each to be more than the sum of their parts. Oftentimes it's less, because you deal with redundancy across different systems. Like we had a conversation yesterday about like, how come Slack on my phone doesn't work as well as the desktop? Why are we missing things? Why isn't it smart enough to know what's going on? And I think, in thinking of technology as not being like electronics and wires and hardware, and more about how things become enabled or empowered or simplified through design. Like this is going to be the hardest thing to be done without some sort of advanced machine learning, or like little gnomes like just following you along. Because like Google Now would be great if you had someone constantly checking. If like Daniel had a personal assistant going around observing what he does, monitoring the times that you do check your device and go into apps for things, providing better suggestions, learning from you all the time. It would be amazing, but the energy and the effort and the outputs of that, it's a lot.
Doesn't Nokia's launcher have the Android launcher? I mean Nokia, not Microsoft Nokia. When the day announced, doesn't that do that? It has like a morning, afternoon, and night where it monitors which apps you check. So then it'll serve you a different home screen on your phone depending on. It's like, oh hey, like at lunchtime, Douglas always checks his Instagram, so as soon as it hits noon, from like noon to 4, it's going to show you a homepage that has Instagram as like the first thingy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's something that Android launchers have been doing for a while. Aviate's the reason Yahoo spent whatever they did on Aviate was for that contextual data, and the fact that they had this system where it would basically track you, and although the tracking was meant for marketing purposes to suggest apps, I mean, that's how they make money, because they see what apps you use and then they offer alternatives that you might like as well. And every time they get you to click on one, they get some money. That's the same thing Twitter does.
Mm-hmm.
But more than that, it's offering you morning, afternoon, and nighttime, setups, and you don't have to do anything to change that. And there's a cottage industry of Android launchers that's doing that now. And the good thing, and we'll get to that in a bit, but the good thing about Android in 2014 is that those sort of systems no longer bog down the phone itself. Back when AV8 first came out, the hardware, the battery, everything wasn't really strong enough to support it. And one of my favorite things about 2014 was just that the hardware finally caught up to the software. I never have to buy a phone anymore worrying that the battery's not going to last all day. Seriously, I mean, I can't name a single phone, Android, Blackberry, Windows Phone, or iPhone, that doesn't last at least a whole day. And that wasn't a given in 2013. So, I mean, a lot of that behavior could be that we're offloading some of it to our smartwatches, so we're not taking our phones out as much, but I don't really buy that.
No, well, I think part of it's because we doubled the size of the phones, so we increased the size of the batteries, right?
That's interesting.
That's not always the fact, though. But yeah, I mean, that's a contributing factor.
And the bigger size means I'm doing less on like my laptop and tablet, and I'm doing more on my phone, which means that there's times where I was looking after my friend's cats, and I was watching Netflix on my phone at her house, and because I was too lazy to like turn on TV and like figure out which output, like I just was like whatever. I was watching on my phone, and that was over the holidays. There was like more than 2 days where I got to like 8 p.m. and my phone was like, hey, plug me in. And this is like the Nexus 6. And it was like, plug me in, I'm almost out. So I'm doing so much more on my phone now that it's impacting the battery.
So let's talk about that situation right there, because I think if we want to talk about the next level of tech, because Daniel's right, there is this stabilization of what devices do. We don't really need our phones to do any new things now. We got cool video stuff, we got great screens, we can kind of consume and create content in really smart ways and in beautiful ways. But the next thing is you sitting down to the couch watching Netflix on your phone, and something just says, hey Jane, do you want me to just push this to the display screen and pick this up right where you left off, like in a super easy way? That's not like a new. You're still just watching Netflix, but the component that comes,
because that little Chromecast thing is there, and it's like, wouldn't you prefer to watch this on the TV that's 10 feet away? And sometimes I'm like, yeah, I would, and sometimes I'm like, nah.
Yeah, but that's a prepared system that you've like specifically bought to do that. I'm saying any screen, just send it. Like even as much as what has been added to iOS 8 this year in terms of like cross connectivity between Yosemite and iOS 8 is like really cool. It's still clunky. You still have to pair it.
Yeah,
you still
but
have to like find it.
They're eliminating pairing with guest mode. If my friend had a Chromecast with guest mode, I wouldn't even need to be on her Wi-Fi. I could just turn on her TV and it would be like,
exactly.
Hey.
So I feel like that is just the beginning stage of where we start looking at all these touch points, whether you're using your phone a lot or your tablet a lot, they just become screens that are outputs or inputs for the bigger system, which is working for you. And Daniel made a really good point about Twitter and the ad model. I don't think that's going to work in terms of monetizing where the next generation of tech goes, which is like deep, useful services. But I think it might go back to, like, wouldn't you pay, if you're willing to pay like $9 a month to just watch TV through Netflix or Show Me or whatever, wouldn't you pay like $15 a month to have like a digital personal assistant, to have her just working for you all the time, being super helpful, taking walks by the beach?
The only way to do that is to feed all of your pertinent life information into a system and have it crunch the numbers. So
we're already doing that, right? But
we are, but we're doing that, and we're giving permission for these companies to take in all this data. But the only like Google's the biggest and best example of this, because you give them permission to feed your email, your maps information, your passive location data into a single source, and it spits out Google Now, which is really quite incredible when you think about how much data goes into it. But at the same time, what you're talking about, the ability to throw any content to a particular screen, that's not really doable because we've tried that before and open standards don't work. So, for example, Sony has the ability to throw any piece of content from your smartphone or tablet to any DLNA or Miracast connected screen. The problem is that the open standards are often interpreted differently. It's a similar problem to IMAP. Every single server interprets IMAP differently. Every single TV interprets DLNA or Miracast differently. So because AirPlay is a closed-loop system that only works with iOS devices, yes, you have to explicitly pair it and then send it to the screen, but it works. Whereas DLNA, I find, never works reliably, and Miracast is just a joke.
You're totally right. And so I wouldn't say that every open standard works that way. I think the bad ones work that way, and the protocols created by these hardware companies where they're doing their own proprietary interpretation of that are bad. But for example, like USB works. Some of the new Wi-Fi sharing modes work really well. Although even in that instance, it's an implementation thing. Like we talked, I think last week or the week before about FireChat and how just it doesn't work. Like it had to be built custom on Android because they're not supporting that. But I think that's where the work comes in. Like that's where it's not like you're not going to get any better just by bumping specs anymore. Like these things aren't going to get better through Moore's law. It's going to have to be software.
No, but Moore's law is not going anywhere, and we saw that with something like the iPad Air 2. They had no reason to add an extra core to A8. They had no reason to custom design their own GPU. The iPad Air was already more powerful than most tablets on the market, but they did it because they are future-proofing their hardware, and they know that eventually their software is going to catch up, and people are going to be able to take advantage of this. They also know that 12 months, 24 months down the road, there are going to be new products that are going to pair with this. So the more powerful an iPhone is, the more it can do in the background to offload, compute to the Apple Watch. So the A9, for example, is going to be optimized. It's probably going to have 4 cores, most likely have 4 cores, and they're going to be using those cores to do compute power for the Apple Watch.
I understand that, and I agree. I'm just saying that, if all these phones just do is the same thing but faster, you're not really going to need that.
It's not about being faster, though. It's about doing more efficiently at the same time. So, we're talking about, like, the first 64-bit chips were not faster in any, numerical way. They're not 2.7 gigahertz. They're 1.9 gigahertz, right? So the Snapdragon 810 is actually slower. It has a slower clock speed per core, but it just has more cores. And that's the same thing that Intel and AMD bumped up against with the quad-core, 64-bit era back in like early 2000s, right? They had no choice. You don't hear of a 10 gigahertz Intel Core i7. You hear about an octa-core 2.5 gigahertz or whatever, because the actual clock speed generates, the higher the clock speed, it generates more heat, and that's far more difficult to run efficiently with batteries being as small and as inefficient as they are.
Douglas, do you think, because earlier on you said that I think this kind of ties into what you're saying about you don't think we need our phones to do more. You think that, and I don't know if I really can see where you're coming from with that, because and it feels like the same point that you're making with the hardware, but to make clear, I agree with you on the second point, but not on the first point. I think that hardware has kind of stabilized to the point where you can make an affordable phone with great hardware and not have problems with software. But I don't know if I agree with you when you say that we don't need our phones to do more, and I think part of our phones doing more and figuring out how our phones can do more in a really meaningful way will be helped by better hardware.
Yeah, okay, so I think breaking this down, we have to talk about what I mean by more, because it's very confusing, and I'm coming at it from my own perspective. So just let's trace it back to smartphone development, where you have dumb phones which do one thing, send and receive calls, and then they do a second thing. They're doing more, like a new feature set, a new dynamic, which is text messages. Then they open up and they maybe have some basic application stuff, so it can be calendar, contacts, some sort of smart contextual thing. Then you get maybe more robust apps, or probably the next thing was probably, and this was tied into hardware developments, so network capacity, radios to do internet connectivity. So now you have internet-enabled phones to do some basic web browsing. Then you have smarter phones that can run complex applications. Then you probably have faster radio stacks, so you can do like video consumption. Then you have cameras, creation tools. You have those dynamics. So when I'm saying more, I'm saying like a really new capability, like a new almost vertical of function. I think where with smartphones are at, we've gotten kind of stabilized in
That's
the
so sad.
they're used for.
That's so sad to say that you don't need it to do more. Like, isn't that like, for me?
Sorry,
that's you're saying that these devices we have in our pockets are fine the way they are.
No, what I'm saying is I'm no longer expecting the device to be the workhorse for the next grouping of mores, the next grouping of functionalities. I'm expecting that to come from
like this.
All these devices working together to make what I'm already doing better, or to enable new things. Because that's why I think like when smartphones plateaued in their capabilities, people were always like, oh, augmented reality, and like all the like they were trying to find like a new thing, or 3D. They're trying to add like that next interface or capability.
Plateauing in their capabilities at all.
Well, but looking for a new thing to justify what they were going to be about, and then all of a sudden people are like, well, actually that's not really interesting or cool, and then it goes back to, okay, let's be more efficient, let's have the battery run better, let's have these things happen. I don't think that if you quadrupled the power if like the iPhone 8 is just more powerful in all these ways, I don't think that power is going to create a new like smell-o-vision feature that's added to what smartphones are in the way that I just traced that thing. I think that power is going to enable, kind of like what Daniel said, is being able to do multiple things at once, or dedicating all that resource to making the things that you do interact with other things.
But that is doing more. I think you're looking at it in a binary way. It's like,
well, so that's
a
my
comet,
definition of more,
and there's a big tail, and you're talking about adding more pieces of rock to the end of that tail, which is not necessary because the comet's already really big and destructive. And like, I agree with that, but the phone is still going to be the epicenter of everything we do. It's not going to change. It's just going to enable more cloud-enabled services to push more data and more experiences to us. So, you have a good example of that is the PlayStation Home or PlayStation Now, and the Akamai powered, cloud server that will stream a game to you. I think the basic compute power necessary to do that is X, and once you get past that, and the phone can do as little as it needs to locally, but still.
So is the phone doing more, or is more happening through
the
phone as a touch point?
But the phone is doing more, because the phone still needs X as a baseline to perform. But it also,
and even then, streaming games to your phone. We've been playing games on our phone for a while now. Is that a new thing, or is it like, I guess I'm trying to break down more as in like, oh, we've never been able to have the capability to like take a picture or access the internet, and now we're talking about...
what you're saying. I get what you're saying, that you think that the next mores, as you say, are going to be like, oh, your phone can now like control X, Y, and Z aspects of your home because of the Internet of Things and this overarching system that feeds information to all of those devices. But you have to realize that, like, let's say when there's like a flying car or a hovercraft, and they're like, oh, and like your phone plays into it and ties into the system in this way, that the current like hardware specifications and like the current where we are currently, like it's not going to be enough for everything. You can't just say that it's going to be like that's enough for all future needs.
So
I
let's
don't
talk
think
about
it should be.
hovercrafts.
I don't think
No,
it should
seriously,
be. I think the more our phones do, the less time we spend looking at people. And I think that's another problem, is that as we push our phones to do more in our lives and replace everyday things, that becomes a problem because you spend less time. And I mean, even this may not be a great example, but I spend a lot less time at the movie theater with friends because it's so easy to just pick up Netflix and stream it to a screen in my home, or to sit in bed and watch Netflix.
Yeah. Oh, and the last few movies we've gone to have been like super fun, right?
Right, but it's also that's the thing, is that you think to do it less, and you end up with people, checking their screens during dinner because that's an accepted form of behavior, and the fact that our phones are more than just can do a lot more than just open Instagram and make send text messages and make phone calls. The fact that we can literally do anything we want on our phones at all times of the day means that we have an increasing number of excuses not to be paying attention to the people around us.
Yeah. Well, that's an entirely,
But that was also a feature of 2014 that I found to be quite absurd, quite upsetting.
You talk about the checking your phone at the dinner table, and isn't it that's kind of now an acceptable way to behave. Do you guys feel really crappy when you do that? I feel like a really bad person. Like if my phone goes off and I know that it's like, yeah, but I know that it's like if it's a family member who's like their flight is delayed or something and I have to respond, I always feel like such a dick when I pick up my phone.
Yeah, but it's also one of those things where there were reasons to get up from the table before smartphones too.
Yeah.
There's just more excuses not to pay attention to the people around you now, and I think one of those like check boxes of smartwatches was that you're not going to have to take out your phone as much because you can triage notifications more efficiently and know when to take out your phone and when not to.
Well, you read my mind, because I was going to say, even now with my smartwatch, like when someone's talking to me and I receive a notification, I either have to prevent myself from looking at it and be like, nope, check it later. Because I know that if they're telling me something about like what they did last night, like so even something mundane, if I look at my watch and do this, I'm like, that makes you look like such a bitch.
Well,
like,
Jane and I wrote a whole article about this earlier in the year.
Yeah.
Like, what's the etiquette of using tech, and when do people notice? And I think even just what Jane's talking about is like the preemptive apologizing to let them know that the thing you're doing on your phone is actually an important thing, rather than what we're doing 90% of the time, which is just hearting Instagram photos. Like back when you got an important call at a restaurant, I mean, someone had been hit by a car, and you got up and everyone was like, "Oh, okay, go take care of that." Now you have to be like, that message will come to you on your phone, and you have to let everyone know that it's a different thing than getting 2 favorites on your tweet or something like that.
The worst thing about smartwatches, though, is that there isn't that distinction yet. I guess like the priority mode and stuff, it kind of helps. I don't know.
Yeah, that's new to Android Wear 5, and I think that was a big change to Lollipop in general.
But that system is so confusing to me. Like
It is, but I think the idea behind it is sound, because what it's doing is Google's saying, we understand that you get a ton of notifications. We're sorry, but we have a really big app store, and you've mistakenly downloaded way too many apps, and they'll all send you notifications. We can't do anything about that, but we can allow you to set a priority mode so that you can manually allow mom, dad, girlfriend, boyfriend, brother, sister, and your favorite apps to send you notifications, and leave the rest out while you're at dinner. And by the way, here's a single toggle that can make that happen, and everything else we'll be doing behind the scenes. So, for example, when we know that you're at a restaurant, we can put your phone on silent, or that's another thing that phones have been able to do this year. A lot of features like Moto Assist have been integrated into the OS itself, and it uses context, it uses your calendar, it uses location to figure out when you're busy and when not to disturb you. Because smartphone manufacturers they understand that addiction is a real thing, and
so that's the thing that I don't know if I was saying it. I can't remember who I was talking to, but I was saying that I can't, I was complaining about Lollipop and how, yeah, my only way so that my phone doesn't disturb me all day every day is to put it on that like that blocked mode where it blocks everything, and then it just doesn't set off alarms or do any of the stuff that you actually do want it to do. And then if you put it on priority but turn down the ringer, it for phone calls will vibrate twice and then just go like just do nothing. So a lot of the time you miss those. So I don't know why I can't be the only person who with KitKat just turned off vibration, turned off all noises, because I check my phone so often anyway that it's unlikely that I will miss anything.
Yeah,
So,
I think there's a big issue with Lollipop around.
that I think is a behavior thing that Google hasn't recognized, is that some people just want to silence everything, not turn them off, but silence everything except for like alarms and potentially phone calls, because they're checking their phone so often anyway that they don't need Google's help in like telling them when the notifications come in and whether
they do need Google to help in a way more holistic way. So it's just like, oh, okay, hey, your meeting's over? Here's the 5 messages you received. This is the priority one.
But I think Google is trying really hard, and the sad thing is that there still doesn't exist a thing where when I'm watching Netflix on my phone and killing the battery, even when I have it on Do Not Disturb, those notifications still pop up on my screen, and I have to like touch them to get them away. So why isn't there a Do Not Disturb mode that assumes I'm playing a game or doing something on my phone that's important, and it's like, oh, she doesn't want to be disturbed, like not doesn't want to be disturbed in her life, but doesn't want to be disturbed on the phone.
I think that's just an effort on Google's part to simplify Android in general. Android for a long time, and this is kind of one of my touch points of the year, is that OSs got simple and they got more complicated at the same time.
Yeah.
And iOS 8, Android 5, they're all examples of these companies trying to differentiate between what we do and what we continue to want to do on the desktop versus the limitations of a mobile phone and perhaps the behaviors that we display on a mobile phone, and how people don't necessarily always want to be buzzed. We want.
Yeah.
And I think Google's done a really good job with Google Now to try to offload a bunch of those notifications that we would normally be pushed to just silently give us these small pieces of information.
Yeah.
It's also sending me notifications for things that I haven't told it to. So like if I receive an email with an appointment time, but I haven't set that in my calendar, Google Now still tells me like, hey, someone told you have to be at your physio appointment at this time. You need to leave now. Like,
but then this also backfires because some PR person I can't remember who it was like, oh yeah, but I didn't get into the office until 2 p.m. and then I got a Google Now meeting thing for like office 2 p.m. and I was like, no.
Yeah, I mean that's just one of those things that it's the limitation of language.
Right.
But it's context. It's context. It's knowing what you need at that time. If there was a phone that would let me know the information that I need when I need it, that's way better to me, or more useful and important and like life-changing than getting a higher resolution screen or more megapixel camera or something like that. That is like true technological change.
Sure, and I think if we're looking at one of the buzzwords of 2014, there's Fleek and hot takes and Bay and all those things, but there's also context and priority and all of these things that are boring but sort of important in our daily lives. And context is a big one, and I think there's been a movement to sort of make phones less intimidating. Everybody's sort of entrenched in an ecosystem or a manufacturer that they like. They're not gonna. Most people don't want to just switch from Android to iOS or iOS to Windows Phone on a whim anymore, because they've already made a lot of purchases. They already have their things set up the way that they want to. So instead of sort of this this movement to get people to buy into an ecosystem, they're just making the ecosystems that you're already in more mature and more capable. And iOS 8 and Android 5, and to a lesser extent Windows Phone 8.1 and Blackberry 10.3 are examples of that.
Yeah, so, I agree. And we talked a lot about, and that's where this is why we're tech writers and other people aren't, because we recognize or dedicate time in understanding the difficulties of like how people approach tech, where people who are already invested in tech maybe just have blinders or don't even see the impediments. Like,
is that why we're tech writers?
Well, I think it's why we're,
because we're full of our own self-importance.
Yeah,
yes.
we're not good at
that was the subtext to what I was saying. But no, I think that maybe is what makes a good tech writer, is like applying, again, context to that understanding. Because you have major, like, both Google and Apple have pages on their website about here's the steps you need to take if you want to switch from a Android phone to an iOS, or an iOS to an Android phone. And you know, if you have to go read about how to like take, just from an external position, I have phone A, I want a new phone B. They all generally do the same things. This one's newer, and it's red versus blue. I'm switching from team red to team blue. If I have to go to a website and like read a list of like steps to take to get from team red to team blue, I
think you're missing the point.
Technology's not working for you. No, well, I'm either missing the point or making a different point. Go.
Well, my point will be that these are different companies who have their own bottom line and their own, I guess their own agenda. And the fact that they've gone from saying, why would you switch? We're the best, to saying, if you want to switch, it's not impossible. Here's how you can do it.
No, I totally
kind of ignore the fact that in any industry, different ecosystems will exist.
I totally agree with that. And I think that's really important. I think to parallel it to other situations, if you buy a Honda car and then you buy a Ford car, you don't need to read about how to drive a new car. You just plug in your keys and go.
Once like Internet of Things takes over the world and our cars are capable of doing much more, like if you had a Nokia 3210 and wanted to switch to like, I don't know, some other phone that I can't remember the name of, that was easy to do, because it's fine. Now you had to relearn like, you know, text messages are accessed from a different menu or whatever, but it was easy because the phones didn't do anything. They sent text, they made calls. Java email if you were feeling it. But other than that, it's like
J2ME, ride or die, memory leaks.
Like, they didn't like, there wasn't a whole lot to switch with. Yeah.
Okay, so I think one of the most frustrating parts of my job is dealing with, you know, friends and family members going, hey, what phone to buy? And I love answering that question, but I feel like it's frustrating because then I'm not doing a good enough job in my job telling people what phone to buy. But more than that, a lot of the questions are really, you know, asinine, like how do I get my contacts from my iPhone to my new Android? And I'm like, why isn't your manufacturer making that easy? Why is it only one or two, like why is it Motorola, you know, why is it only Motorola doing a good job allowing people to transfer contacts from an iPhone to an Android? And why don't people know that contacts are generally stored in the cloud now? And if you have a Google address or an iCloud address or a Yahoo address or an Outlook address, your contacts are pretty much there.
This is what I'm saying. Why do you have them saved to your SIM card? Like, do you have any people I know personally that have been like, oh, I'm switching phones, and I'm like, okay, so do you have them in your Gmail contacts? Like, why would I have I don't want my text message contacts, the people that I text, to be with my emails. And I'm like, do you not know how like contextual profiling works? Like,
but
anyway.
It's also like, you know, people have to deal with things like CardDAV and CalDAV, and it's like nobody knows what the hell that is. They just want to log into Google and get all of their calendars and their contacts. And I take it for granted that it's super easy, but I guess it's not. And it's really one of those things that it's like a bare bones basic piece of functionality.
Yeah, it's not
super intimidating. No, it's super intimidating to people.
Yeah.
And these manufacturers make it really, really hard.
But they also, I don't know, I think we take for granted like the knowledge that we have, and even on a really basic level, like, I don't know, there's a very smart man who works in the same office building as us, and he came over to MobileSyrup's little work area, and he was like, hey, I'm buying a new iPhone today, which should I buy, the iPhone 6 or the iPhone 6 Plus? And I was like, that's like, that to me is like, should I buy an apartment or a house? And it's like, well, which do you need? Like,
yeah.
And how much money do you have?
Should I marry for looks or money?
But it's like, But it's like,
Oh.
do you like big phones, or do you want a phone that's small and you can use with one hand? It's like, oh, I definitely want to use my phone use it with one hand. And I was like, well, there's your answer.
Yes.
Like,
okay, but that's you being like a subject matter expert and like having useful information based upon what's out there.
No, that's not being a subject matter expert. That's like.
Well, no, but you are. We would ask the same people things about cameras, about bicycle, like all these things. What Daniel is talking about is the people who make technology not prioritizing their efforts in making that technology.
I know, but what I'm saying is that you can't place all the blame on it when and I would say that I'm the same when it comes to cars, houses, everything, like jewelry, clothes, when the people you're selling to are so stupid and don't ask, like, I feel like
no, sorry, it's not. Why should they ever have to spend any time learning about CalDAV, CarDAV? Like, so,
no, I'm not
for example,
no. That's their fault, but you can't say
not
you can't
their
place,
fault. That's
the manufacturer's fault.
Oh yes,
it's the manufacturer's fault. But I'm saying that you have to. I'm sympathetic to the fact that even if they made everything really easy to switch, you would still get someone saying, like, I don't know if I want the big one or the small one, and I'm like, well, how much room do you have? Like, you'll still deal with the fact that.
Yes, but what I'm saying is should I get the big one or the small one is a totally different situation than all the other issues that make even just engaging with technology way harder than it should be. Imagine if you had to like software update your baseball bat or something like I spent my holidays trying to get my stepmother's email, her personal email, moved from Outlook Express to Outlook 2010, not even the newest version. To do that, so this isn't like, oh, I'm trying to get from Google to Apple. I'm trying to get from one company's older product to a moderately newer product. To do that, I had to use 3 intermediaries to convert emails.
I love how you're talking
to a
like
format that the newer system would understand. Like, can you imagine being a person where you're like, hi, I'm 55, I've raised these many kids, I have a life to get to, all I want is my emails to work in the new system, and I have to like go deep into the forums to understand which programs to convert my personal information to, because this technology company hasn't spent any time making the most basic thing simple to do. Why isn't it one button? I was like, hey, we saw that you
agree with you.
You had Outlook Express, and you have your emails saved here. Do you want all your emails in your thing? Boom. Like, people make a lot of fun about, BlackBerry's approach to technology, but BBM on your iPhone still works with 1.0 version of BBM.
Okay, but I agree with you definitely that going from one company
with anything
to
because they spent the time to make sure, because it's much easier for technology manufacturers to just say, oh, hey, you have to upgrade to the new thing. We don't support this thing anymore.
Yeah, but that's absolutely not true, because you cannot send and receive half of the new features on BBM from BBM 6 or whatever it is now.
But you can send BBM messages.
Yeah, and you can send an email to somebody using Outlook Express to somebody. The fact that you are having to muck into like the innards of Outlook Express is it's not impugning email. It's impugning the idea that email has advanced to the point where they have to update the database and make it so that it's compatible with newer versions of Windows. Like
email hasn't advanced to the point of anything. It's still literally she had
right,
like
but your mother, your stepmom could have continued using Outlook Express, or just not transferred her emails over and continued gone into Outlook 2010.
It wasn't supported on the version of Windows she was using.
Okay, what I'm saying is that she could still have logged into her email on Outlook 2010. You're talking about transferring over old information. This is a fundamental problem with computers and like the idea of old legacy data being updated to support newer hardware, right? That's why emulation is a thing. That's why you have to, conform to these sort of newer standards, because if I want to use a program that was compatible with Windows 98, I often have to make sacrifices in order to make it work with Windows 10 or 8 or whatever.
So
that's
I think
just a reality.
I think my point was that manufacturers can make it as easy as possible for users, but it still won't be easy enough. I think your point is that it shouldn't be so hard to stay within an ecosystem. Even that's difficult. But you can't expect, like, Outlook Express was like 1997 to it was like 5 years from 1997 onwards. So like early 2000s, like that was gone. So you can't would you expect them to support it forever?
Why? But it's just email. At what point did that person like I understand that we're in the technology space, so we're getting the new thing every year. This person is literally just looking to communicate with their friends and family. They updated essentially every 4 years, every 4 or 5 years, to where the point like they legitimately need a new computer. Why is it like ice ages? Why did it get so hard to just continue doing what they were doing with this new thing? I'm saying, like, fundamentally, the way that technology companies approach doing that stuff is it's not their focus, because they have a financial incentive to like get you buying new products. But
because
then
when
also
that product came out, Elton John's "Candle in the Wind" was #1. Like, that's a long time ago.
And you know what? If you have that song on a CD player, that still works in any CD player. Like, you don't have to like.
Well, it's information. It's not like a physical thing.
No, but
It's,
Like,
I
I
mean,
don't-
eventually,
it's just a song on a disc. It's the same.
like
it's one
eventually you may buy a PlayStation or an Xbox, which is probably for many people the only disk drive remaining in their homes. It is
Yeah.
for me, and those may not play audio CDs anymore, right? Down the road in 20 years, we may get to the point where, yeah, why would they support these legacy mediums when they don't have to? Like, they could advertise the newest, compatibility, but what incentive do they have to support legacy media? It's not like you can play a tape anywhere
That's
else.
already happening too. Like, I know, like 5 years ago, 6 years ago, I made like a video for my sister from like a party that we were at, and she was like, "Oh, can you put that on a DVD for me?" And I burned it onto a disc, thinking that she just wanted a copy of the file, and then she complained it didn't work in the DVD player at home, and I was like, "Oh, that's not like a rewritable DVD. That's a rewritable like CD. Like, you can take the
Okay.
file off it." But that's already happening. Like, it's already happening where.
But that's less of a hardware medium than how the information was formatted, right? So let's talk about not like no longer having CD players, and let's talk about no longer supporting file
Man, this
types.
is not the end of 2014. This is like the end of like.
But like,
2006.
but look
Yeah.
at it. Look at it. Look at the future and say, like, wouldn't it be so much better if the things that are going to change are going to be systems and how we interact? Isn't going to be a situation where, especially with all of our personal information, all of our activity, all these things stored in the cloud, there's going to be some need for mutability of that information, because we can't just say, oh, you just need to buy a new box now, and the new box is it, because nothing exists in the box. The box is just a screen now for all the information that exists somewhere else. So that information is going to have to be dynamic and versatile and constantly updatable. Like we were talking about wearable like fitness trackers, step trackers, and wearing two different ones, and the information that they both were providing being completely different. How is that going to work in an age where we have Apple Health and Microsoft Health and all these things that are trying to track your historical biometrics to have an understanding of whether or not you like have cancer or need to see the doctor, all these things? Like, the way that information is handled, that is like the future of technology. Even just like the Sony hack, going back to this idea that somehow they were able just to get like all of the security. They were just able to go into a server and get like the Outlook profiles and all the saved emails for all these people. Every conversation you ever had professionally and personally is existing out there, and they were just able to take it like right out of a jar.
Well, I think that's sort
but they
of
weren't using Outlook Express.
myopic way of looking at it. I don't think they. I mean, it's a matter of authentication. It looks like they had inside help, so that somebody who knew the ins and outs of the infrastructure helped them get in. But
I'm
also
saying
agree with you.
everything is there.
Yeah, anything stored locally is a problem, and I also
It wasn't
think that,
stored locally.
Well, it was using Outlook, so they were using ActiveSync, they were using um,
Okay.
Exchange, so it was stored somewhere. I mean, it wasn't stored on Microsoft servers. It was basically Microsoft's Exchange infrastructure that was breached, from what I understand.
Yeah.
But I think, talking about this stuff, talking about like legacy systems is a good way to talk about the future of storage and of distribution, because the more we rely on these cloud services to store our data, and we're 10 years into Facebook now, we're like 5 years into Dropbox. Where are all of our things, right? And 2014 was the year that I stopped worrying about local storage, because by and large, all of my photos are on Google Plus and Dropbox. All of my data is on Evernote and Google Drive. All of my thoughts are, in Day One. These are services that I don't host any of this data anymore, and that was a big trend for the year, for me at least, and I know for a lot of other people. Just the efficiency of cloud systems has trumped local storage, and we hear every time I review a Galaxy phone, and people are like, well, at least they still have external media support and removable batteries, and I'm like, why is that important? But that's because some people aren't ready to move into the cloud era, and they don't want to rely on other companies to store their streaming music or store all their written data, right?
Or their personal photos. J-Law, shoutouts. Love you, Katniss. No, but that's the thing, because you're like, you don't have to worry about your stuff being lost on a device now. Now you have to worry about your stuff being somewhere and not understanding. Going back to our security podcast, like, what does it mean to have it in the cloud? What are all the new concerns that are going to come about now that information is way more easily accessible, because you can't just cut a wire? Like, I think that's going to be a big thing in 2015.
Yeah, I think when you say that this year was the year of like getting, like, relying on the cloud, I think I relied on the cloud last year, but I worried about, like, it's not local. Like, what happens if, like, what do I do when it's not right there? And now this year I'm like, it's not like, it's on the cloud. I used to worry about it not being here, and now I worry about it being there.
Yeah, I think this year brought security and the vulnerability of large companies' security infrastructures to the fore, and I implore anybody not using two-factor authentication for every service they can to turn it on today. Make it a New Year resolution. Start doing that, because you're going to be hacked at some point. I mean, whether it's somebody, just breaking into a weak password, or your password being stored on a cloud server that's been compromised. Eventually somebody is going to get somewhere that you don't want them to get, and this is just, the Sony hack is an example of innocent people getting their information strewn around the internet because they worked for a company.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like that's,
or even like the thing that Doug was talking about, the iCloud hack. That's, again, innocent people having their stuff strewn about on the web just because of what they do.
Yeah, and it's so interesting. Like, Apple never really acknowledged what happened there, but I mean, clearly what was going on was that these hackers were using were able to take advantage of the reset password API and just brute force guessed a bunch of these passwords and got into some of these systems.
So I was listening to the last VergeCast of the year. Shout out to The Verge. Right before this podcast, just because whatever. And they were talking.
Love The Verge.
Because I love The Verge. I'm all about The Verge. Nile, what's up, Dieter? Okay. Sorry. And they were talking about, because their last podcast was a few weeks ago, so like right in the middle. This was before the interview had been released for streaming, so it was like right in the middle of like Sony Hack Central Station. And they were talking about just one point that was interesting, how the companies actually responsible for the vulnerabilities haven't been like a source of focus, or have been required to, like, Microsoft hasn't had to come out and talk about how about their Outlook vulnerabilities. Apple really didn't get much heat for iCloud being vulnerable, although that's a very different scenario because that's them trying to balance this like security versus making it easier for users to access their information, as Matt Bragg talked about on our podcast. But like this whole relationship between like trusting not only the place that you're putting it, but like how all the things that place that you're putting it can then be accessed by. Like it's like a Kevin Bacon scenario of like once it's out there, there's this huge spider web of relationships that you're probably not aware of, that no person should have to consciously be aware of, that makes all this stuff vulnerable.
Right, but
and
I mean,
it's horrifying to me, anyways.
So, yeah, I mean, the blame can partly be levied on Apple and Sony, or Apple and Microsoft, but the blame here is poor password management and its authentication. And I think that 2014, one of the biggest trends for me was the idea of alternative forms of authentication. Touch ID was not a 2014 invention, but the idea of alternatives like the NIMI ban, which allows for ECG authentication, it's biometric, it cannot be phished because everybody has a unique heart rate. Things like Touch ID, it's not infallible, but it's certainly a more customer-friendly alternative to remembering, really difficult passwords.
Yeah.
Or the lesser alternative, which is to use the same password everywhere, which too many people still do. So for me, this year kind of was summed up by us versus them. The idea that we have to keep our stuff safe and choose the services that are going to keep our stuff the safest, and making sure that, like we have double locks on our home doors, we have double locks on our virtual doors.
Yeah. Exponential locks, because it's exponential access points. It's funny that all the cool things that I was talking about in like my ideal version of technology require the information that I'm totally afraid of being accessible.
But it's true. I mean, if you don't, like, Farhad Manjoo said something sort of flippantly in one of his most recent columns, but he said, if you don't want your stuff being hacked, don't put it on the internet. Like, if you're worried about sending, lascivious emails to your baby mama or sugar mama or whatever the kids refer to them these days, like, don't send it over email. Don't do that. Like, email is going to be hacked. So, and don't send a Snapchat either, because we know that that's not nearly as secure as people think it is. So, what else did we kind of want to touch on this year? I mean, we sort of talked about 2014 in a roundabout way, but what other stuff stood out to you besides wearables? I'll say one: mobile payments. We haven't really adopted mobile payments in a big way in Canada, but Apple Pay is sort of this high-level trumpet of the future, and we're going to see it in Canada hopefully next year. But just in general, the payment infrastructure has changed. A lot of the banks are getting on board and trying to make it happen. RBC, we did a profile of them a couple of weeks ago. MasterCard and Visa are all doing their own sort of back-end infrastructure stuff, enabling merchants and issuers to enable mobile payments. But will it become something that people care about in 2015? Was 2014 really the beginning of something big, or is it going to peter out?
I think beginning of something big, yes. I don't know. I think that 2015 will be a lot bigger. I don't know what I used in 2015. Will you use in 2015?
Yeah, I think I do.
I
I've really enjoyed using it. But right now it's
in a major way
Android only, Android and Blackberry. So, it leaves a whole lot of a whole big section of the population out.
I think right now you're at the stage where you use it every now and again, and I think that's what I'll be doing next year. I'll use it kind of sometimes, and then maybe 2016 is the year where I'll be like, oh no, this is just how I pay now.
Daniel, were you using it because it was more convenient to use it, or because you were trying to use it?
Well, that's the differentiator, right?
Yeah.
Right now, using your credit card in Canada is a lot more convenient than using a mobile payment system because the infrastructure is set up in such a way that your credit card can be inserted, you enter a PIN, and you press OK, and that's it, or you even tap, and it's over.
Yeah.
Whereas for Android and BlackBerry-based mobile payment systems, you have to explicitly open an app, you have to use your passcode, and then you have to wait while NFC turns on, and then you tap, and it works sometimes, and it doesn't work most of the time. So it's not a great experience yet, but once it becomes more valuable, once your loyalty's been integrated, once you have a single place to control all of your mobile payment stuff, then I think it'll be more valuable than just taking out your credit card, which is usually only attached to a single loyalty. Like you have your Tim card, and you can redeem your points for Tim Hortons dollars or whatever. But if I go into a store and it has a loyalty program, my phone should just detect that I'm at that store and should allow me to collect those loyalty points while making payments at the same time, regardless of what phone or app I'm using.
Yeah, or look at it this way, like using a phone in place of a credit card at the point of sale system will never be, it might be as easy, it'll never be easier, because pulling out a credit card and tapping, it's the same thing. No matter how much Apple CEO would like you to believe that, like, it's so much simpler, just hold it on your thumb. The cool thing happens is when the phone can be the point of sale system in any scenario where you don't have to go to a line. So maybe you go into a store and you're like, oh, I want this, whoop, and you've just bought it. You didn't have to have to go to a register, a point of sale, it's just anywhere. Being able go ahead.
I agree with you, but the thing that I think will differentiate mobile payments is the security aspect, because passcodes they're fallible. I mean, they're 4 to 6 digit numbers that can be stolen. Whereas if you're using your thumb as a primary or even secondary form of authentication, then the fraud rates go down, your liability goes down, the credit cards are on the hook for a lot less fraud, and the banks love it because they don't have to field all these frantic phone calls when your credit card got stolen. Mm-hmm. So I think that's really the main point of this, is that once it combines convenience and added security on top of the existing loyalty stuff, and you're right, and proximity. If you can walk into a store, put things in your cart, and walk out, that's a really convenient method of payment.
It's a dream. But I don't even have to pay for things anymore. They just take the money straight from my account.
My dream
assuming you have it.
Like New Year's Day, touching my thumb to my phone and having brunch delivered for me without getting out of bed. The minute that happens, we're in the future.
Well, I think that's what Hurrier's for.
Shoutouts.
Shoutouts, Hurrier. Yeah. So what else? What else do you guys?
What else happened this year?
Well, BlackBerry. We could talk about BlackBerry.
Okay, you guys start, because I already used up like a lot of my rant on stuff that you guys think that I'm crazy about. So talk to me about your perception of BlackBerry, because I obviously have a high bias opinion of this company and maybe a relationship and perspective on it. But just as external people who saw BlackBerry as a phone manufacturer that was really bad at doing that, and then now is a new thing, or maybe the same thing. Like, how do you guys see BlackBerry now?
Well, I don't see them as a phone manufacturer. They're not. I mean, they have 2 phones, and they're okay for a very small number of people. But even BlackBerry knows that they're no longer an OEM in the traditional sense. And I think people, even if they're diehard BlackBerry fans who will clutch their classics until the day they die, need to acknowledge that BlackBerry doesn't care about you that much anymore. They're okay if you buy one of their phones, but they don't make any money from you unless you're boss pays for Bez, and that's really how they're going to go about this. So I think we need to stop referring to BlackBerry as an OEM, because every time it's just putting BlackBerry in the same sentence as Apple and Samsung is doing both Apple, Samsung, and Apple, Samsung, and BlackBerry a disservice, because they're no longer the same kind of company.
Right.
BlackBerry is a lot more like Microsoft than they are like Samsung or Apple.
And I think it's one of the things, like, I feel like I haven't felt that they were like in the same category for a really long time. But then the fact that before this year, I think they were still trying to convince us that they were. Yes. So that almost put them in that category. So even though I was like, that's not what you do anymore, like, give it up. But they were like, no, this is what we do. And I was like, okay, you want to be compared to those guys, I'll compare you to those guys. But now that I feel like there's so much, like, this year, like, there's so much less panic and so much less desperation.
Alicia Keys wasn't that long ago, right? Like,
no.
they were the last person to know that relationship was over.
So I'm like, I feel like this year there was less panic, and I feel like because they've accepted it, now we can finally categorize them the way that we've wanted to for so long. And in the end, they come out in a pretty positive light, which is cool.
They threw out all their ex's stuff to take it all the way back.
Ooh,
and now they're not sad and single, they're now, like, empowered and single.
Yeah.
Yeah,
we should put that one in an article. That analogy is good.
It is. I mean, it's true. They don't need. They've limited their focus so much that they don't need the same customer that for many years was buoying them to, other people, right? So I don't know. I mean, it's sort of unfair too, because we're a consumer-focused site, and BlackBerry still does so much of our search business, but we can't talk about them in the same way as we used to, because BlackBerry is trying so hard to disconnect from that sort of legacy persona.
Well, everybody's got to grow and change, man. We're growing and changing, and we're doing crazy new stuff this year. I'm sure we've got even crazier stuff on the docket for next year, and I think we have a responsibility as what it means to be mobile changes. We change along with it. Like, we didn't not write about wearables. We didn't say, like, that's not a phone. Cannot go on site. It's just part of our evolution along with the industry. But I think you're totally right that it does a huge disservice to consider BlackBerry anything like the other people out there or what they used to consider themselves as.
Yeah, and I think it's just a matter of people reframing them in their minds and being comfortable with that.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to continue talking about them because they're still a Canadian story, and they're still very much a part of our DNA, and I like that. I think the people at BlackBerry are wonderful. They're doing good work, and they try really hard, and they're very earnest about their successes and failures, and I think John Chen is a great representation of that. He represents a company that's humble and trying to rebuild something based on what worked while acknowledging what didn't. And most companies should have as little hubris as BlackBerry does.
Also, going back to the not sexy versus still useful thing, it might not be sexy to talk about like security and services, but like the BlackBerry Blend stuff is pretty cool. And when Sony got hacked, they had to go back to using Blackberries. Like, what they're doing now is like valuable. It's just not what Apple is doing or Samsung is doing, or it's not sexy. Maybe security becomes sexy in 2015. InfoSec, Taylor Swift.
I just think we need to grow our knowledge of this. We know consumer back to front. I have pledged to make security part of my own sort of learnings in 2015 because people need to know about it, and that's something that most people don't really understand. It's complicated, it's boring, and it's something that you don't really need until it affects you. And I think that's what a lot of companies realize, is that they don't take it seriously until they get bitten.
Screwed. Hey,
Yeah.
Sony got hacked more than once. Even they weren't taking it seriously. Like, how many times you got to get hacked before you're like, we should have the best security in the world?
Oh,
Yeah.
totally. There was no reason that they should have gotten hacked this time. But good for BlackBerry for propping them up in their time of need.
Yeah, the Blackberries that they got from the basement.
9900s.
Yeah.
Amazing.
That says something too, though. It's like the basement it was in the basement of a building that's been like marked as like an historic structure on the Sony Pictures Entertainment lot in LA. It's like
It's like we needed
where
this
do we
for
put these? And it's like, yeah, we'll put them with that other old stuff over there.
Well, at least
Take
they
it
own
out
the
with
rights
the
to their own
eight-tracks.
story, right?
Pardon?
At
Yeah.
least they worked.
They own the rights to their own story.
Take out the battery, put it back in. It just worked.
What else?
So,
What else happened this year?
well, lots of phone releases. I think the highlights for me were the new Moto X, the iPhone 6 Plus, which just blew me away by how much it could do. The battery's fantastic, camera's really good. And we were talking about doing more on your phone. I think bigger screens legitimately have a place, and the fact that they're taking, they're sort of eating into a lot of what we thought of as like the tablet market. So that's a big thing that happened, is that phablets started eating tablets, and we wrote about that so many times. Wearables, yeah.
Fourth carrier didn't kind of get it, maybe.
Fourth carrier, sort of. I mean, the regulatory stuff is going to play a bigger part in 2015, but yeah, I mean, Wind's here to stay. They are going to hopefully get that set-aside spectrum that's coming in March.
Yep. And then 2016 will look real good.
2016 will look amazing for them, I hope. But the CRTC had, a very difficult time on their hands. They had to figure out whether they should regulate parts of the industry that the carriers were. I mean, the big three are so dominant, and the CRTC has a very difficult role because they don't want to have a heavy hand in regulation, but they also need to step in to make sure that these companies are not, taking advantage of consumers. And it could, there's an argument to be made that they are. They're certainly too dominant in many cases. So that's going to be something that we're going to talk about a lot next year.
Chairman Handsome, he's got a plan.
Yeah.
Man with a plan.
So, New Year's resolutions, guys.
Oof. I don't know. Be less reliant on my phone. Be a better person.
I think that applies to everybody.
Well, there you go. You guys can have that one for free.
I want to lock up my personal security and information. I want to only use technology when it's really benefiting me, not because it's in front of me. I want to use it to help me get in the best health of my life, and that's not just being in shape, but dealing with like certain issues that I have, like that keep me from being healthy. And I want to find someone who loves me.
Oh, buddy, we love you.
We love you.
But
that's
won't,
fine.
like,
We understand if we're not good enough for you. It's okay.
You're all spoken
too
for.
attached.
I think that he wants somebody to snuggle with at night.
Yeah.
Or someone to share the burden of your cats and their snuggle needs.
I'm just gonna buy the biggest Android tablet I can and like just tape someone's face to it.
It's a good idea.
What about you, Daniel?
I want to learn. I think I spent a lot of time this year sort of reasserting, learning about things that I already know, and I think next year is a year of learning for me. I'm getting married, which is insane, so I want to learn about, being a more patient person, and yeah, that too, Doug. I want to. Doug's being saucy on the chat.
Saucy.
I want to make sure that I continue to grow as a writer, and I think that's going to be shown off in new ways on the site. We're going to do a lot more video as well, and a lot more long form pieces. Yeah, Tweets in 140 words. So I'm excited for 2015. And yeah, that's about it. I think we've had a really great year on the podcast. I want to thank everybody for listening. It's been a really cool, fun ride, and it's only going to get better next year. And if you have any suggestions for the pod, let us know. And we are always open to that. Shout outs to everybody who's stuck around this long every week. It means so much to us that you're still here. I want to thank our amazing sponsor, Rome Mobility. They've been with us for 4 weeks now, and we cannot thank them enough. They're also going to be covering our CES, where they're sponsoring our CES coverage, and they are fantastic. If you need anything for great U.S. coverage anywhere in the U.S. or Mexico, hit romobility.com. We will have lots more guests in 2015 as well. That's something that our friend Christian from Rome asked us, so we are complying with that. And thank you. Thank you, Doug. Thank you, Jane. Thank you, listeners. Thank you, readers.
Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you, everybody. You guys are amazing, and we love you so much. Go hug somebody. Just find somebody to hug.
I'm gonna go
loving.
hug the closest barista.
Oh, that sounds amazing. So, from everybody on the SyrupCast and MobileSyrup and BetaKit, check us out.
Do it for the pod!
And you should enjoy a responsible and safe New Year.
Happy New Year.